There is an established understanding that there are certain things which are impossible. Things that go against the natural order of logic and structure put forth when the first atoms exploded into existence. But every once in a while, when the wind is fair, when the stars align, when nonsense becomes sense, life becomes a little bit matter in the most splendid of ways. The impossible becomes possible.
Apparently the One Piece live action show is really good. And it is quite a surprising feat considering the history of live action adaptations, particularly with anime shows and manga.
Cowboy Bebop and Death Note seem to fit well within a live-action medium because of the relatively grounded nature of its setting and story. But One Piece relished in its cartoonish nature and style. It was a bright and colourful, grandiose pirate adventure epic with high action pieces where you could feel the weight and power behind each punch thanks to the incredibly striking artwork and a remarkably extensive detail to the world that practically lives and breathes.
Calling this adaptation difficult would be an understatement. It would be near impossible without sacrificing the quality and care Ichiro Oda put into his work. And yet, somehow, Netflix's One Piece managed to pull it off. And the question I'd like to ask is, how? And I can only assume one thing. It's a Christmas miracle.
This came out in August.
Shut the up! I mean, obviously it was close supervision from the original manga, as well as the respect and dedication the film team had for the source material. However, you tend to lose elements and aspects when you translate source material from one medium to another. So that begs the question. What did they do when they adapted One Piece? What was changed and what was kept the same? And how did they manage to make the more anime-esque conventions work in a Western style?
Season 1 follows the East Blue Saga, which consists of Romance Dawn, the introduction of the core Straw Hat crew, Luffy, Zoro and Nami, Orange Town, the first Devil Fruit powered pirate they come up against, who's also a fan favourite, Syrup Village, the introduction of Usopp, the crew's resident sniper, Baratier, the introduction of the cook Sanji, and a glimpse into how dangerous of a journey they have to face, and Arlong Park, the overall villain of the saga, and a personal villain to Nami the Navigator.
Now that sounds like a lot to pack within 8 episodes, and that's because it is. There is a lot that they had to cut for the first season, and I understand it from a practical standpoint. For the story that they want to tell, they just need to keep what matters to the characters thematically.
They placed importance on where the characters are and where the characters end up emotionally, and how they tie into their more flexible retelling of the story. That does sadly include cutting a lot of the central cast and some of the characters' uniqueness that helps shape a lot of the world. Even if the beginning and end point remain the same, the end point's impact is shifted. But while different, that doesn't necessarily mean bad. While we don't explore Orange Town and meet the assortment of the Buggy crew, we are still intimidated by Buggy's presence in how he's presented, now keeping the whole town hostage in a circus tent, which I do love a lot more because of how well it fits within his theme, as well as the planting of the seed for Nami's understanding that Luffy is a different kind of pirate. While we don't have the grand return of Captain Kuro and the Black Cat Pirates, we have a clash of pirate ideologies and the character growth of Usopp and Kaya learning to become more independent and self-reliant. One of the more ingenious changes of the story is the interweaving of Kobe and Helmeppo's rise in the ranks of the Marines.
In the manga, this is an isolated side story shown in the cover chapters of the manga. It's how Oda cultivates the lively nature of his world. However, in Okla, I might not use that name, they have a lot more of a screen presence, written in as a B-plot for the show.
I honestly thought they would just show up for an episode like in the anime, but they serve as a way to dissect the other power that the Straw Hats face, the Marines, their ethics and role in society. I genuinely adore this edition, making the main sea powers parallel and contrast each other in their ideologies. The more interesting change is that they have Luffy's grandpa Garp become a much more prominent figure in the East Blue Saga. He shows up in the aforementioned cover pages for Kobe and Helmeppo and isn't even revealed as Luffy's grandpa until, I want to say, 400 chapters in. And, you know, it makes sense on paper. It creates a slightly clearer picture of Luffy's childhood and family, which would help a lot of new viewers. And thematically, he represents the old guard making way for the next generation.
Whether he works wholly or not kinda depends on person to person. For me, he has more positives and negatives, and his actor, Vincent Reagan, is absolutely fantastic, and I would not argue to see more of him. We probably won't in the series, but it's a nice thought nonetheless. I'm not going to suggest that they take more creative liberties when tackling future arcs and sagas, because I do think One Piece fans will kill me for suggesting other ways, but the fun of watching a live-action adaptation, or any adaptation for that matter, is how they create their own unique spin. Something I mentioned in an earlier video about the Monster Hunter live-action film, the fun opportunity presented there was showing how brutal and dangerous the wildlife was. The opportunity here? All those silly, goofy anime aspects that would look ridiculous in live action, they are held up with so much seriousness, and it is just hilarious to watch. I might dissect this in a future video, but the advantage of live action is that you're probably more likely to take it a lot more seriously. Not saying that you would, just saying that it might be easier. Animation is at its best when it's flexing its creativity muscles and showing you spectacles you wouldn't think possible. Its disadvantage is that most audiences prematurely think that any animation is for a children's audience. Live action works because you easily connect to the world and the characters because they look just like you. It's that easy one step closer to relatability. Why do you think there are so many live action remakes? Other than greed. Not this one though. But the disadvantage is how restrictive it can be. Not only in style, trying to be as realistic as possible, but in writing as well.
If you want to be taken seriously, live action is always the safest choice. Again, I'm not saying it's the best choice. Primal, Infinity Train, Midnight Gospel, these are shows with either a lot of brutal intense action, heavy subject matter, or well-written drama that is helped by the animation medium.
I'm so desperately trying not to be misunderstood as saying animation can't be serious because of how much love and admiration I have for the medium. I'm just trying to say why studios would choose live action instead of animation, not as a marketing choice, but as a creative choice as well. Which goes into the same question. For a series as silly and goofy as One Piece, how do you translate the anime-esque conventions into live action? Well, suspension of disbelief is stronger than you think. As long as you make logic and rules, anything is acceptable as long as you don't break them.
The obvious CGI usage of Buggy and Luffy's powers range from really cool to really iffy, but stylistically works in a weird sort of way. When the world looks and feels weird already, aspects like how their powers look sort of blends in. When they shout out their moves, which it should be ridiculous, but they say it with such passion and power that it comes off as effective. What did take my breath away is how they handled Mihawk, mainly because of how much more shooty swords become later. Not saying they probably will for this show, but I think they make it work here by showing the effect on the environment around it. The slice through the ocean into the galleon is just, it's so good! One Piece is built on the foundation of slapstick and the conventions of shonen anime. Opera made it work by having the show relish these conventions and ideas.
It doesn't question why genuinely creepy telepathic snails are the main methods of communication. It doesn't question why fishmen look like different stages of botched plastic surgery. That being said, I really do love the look of them. It doesn't question why everyone shouts out their fighting moves. I mean, one does, but he begrudgingly accepts this, and I think it's because the writers didn't want him shouting out rice dishes as his moveset.
There's been a concern of bathos in the writing, characters making fun of the established world around them, which would make fans of the original manga alienated a little. but there is honestly none of that. Or at least it didn't come off as pathos. There is an inherent love and respect for this world that you can see and hear from the set and costume design, the sound and musicscape, the actors giving it their all in every scene, and the writing of the show. Are there some things I wish they kept? Yes, of course, I'm a fucking anime fan. There are certain moments in the manga that added so much gravitas and drama to the story, namely Nami's overall arc.
I think how they streamlined it is fine, but the rearranging order of events did take away from Nami's impact. I'm only picking on this moment because how much it meant to me and solidified me as a One Piece fan. There are other moments I could pick on, like Arlong's introduction or how Kuro's plan feels slightly off. But with every negative, there are 2 positives. I would just be remiss not to mention them. I could also list aspects that they could improve on, as if my one voice in a million matters. All I wanted to explore is how they managed to adapt one of the most expressive, stylistic, and cartoonish series into such a restrictive medium. And succeeded. I do hope that with each passing series this show gets, it just gets better and better. I could also list a bunch of advantages that this show has over the original manga and anime. But for now, the most important thing for me is that this Luffy becomes king of the pirates.